You ever heard the old saying, penny saved is a penny earned? I'll tell you what, that's a very old saying. And it has been around so long that if you adjusted that with inflation, it would probably be at least $1,000 saved is $1,000 earned today or more. So saving money, okay? Anything you can do on your operation to save yourself a dollar, that's a dollar extra profit that goes into your pocket. And one of the ways that your operation can make more money is to save money. And one of the things that you can do is save money on your fencing. It is a large infrastructure investment. Done right, it can last a lifetime. Done wrong, you're going to end up spending more money than you are going to save. So, without further ado, let me give you the top 8 mistakes made fencing around a ranch or a farm. And maybe if you can avoid those mistakes, it's just money in your pocket, man. Number 8, don't use steel posts to electrify on electrified wire or poly wire. You're going to be totally dependent upon insulators to keep your wire off those posts. All it's going to take is an animal to brush by one of those insulators. Yeah, the animal might get a shock, but it's still going to pop that insulator off. Once that happens, it's going to fall down against that post, and right there is where your fence goes down. Then you're going to be spending time, which is money, and maybe money depending on how bad that got tore up, repairing that. So don't really try to not ever use your steel post with your electrified. You can use them for center bracing, and we'll go into that later on. Okay, so that is the number 8 mistake that you see being done out on fences. Oh, wait a minute, not over there. It was over here. Number 7, don't ever energize your gates. Seen it happen. Don't know why folks do that, but do not energize a gate. They make a simple insulated wire. You can get it at virtually any farm supply house that carries electric fencing. It's heavily insulated. It's a good thick wire. If you're doing it in an area that has got a lot of heavy animal traffic, like cattle and so forth, and it's very moist, where they can really step down into that, you might want to go to your fence, dig down at your first post, go down about a foot, all right, put your wire in, run it over, bring it up the other side. Simple. Okay, then you can tie your fencing in at each side of your gate. You know, it's most easier going, duh. It's kind of like the kid with his head in the paint bucket to put the little sign on the side. I've seen it. It's been done. Other people have told me that they've seen it. It's been done. So don't electrify your gates. It's hazardous for one, because as you get older, you get kind of forgetful. All right, and you grab a hold of it. Okay, so number 7, do not energize your gates. Number 6, not using the right fence energizer. You don't know how many times I've had to help people with, why isn't my fence working right? And they're using the wrong fence energizer. The recommended kind of rule of thumb for your electric fence energizer is 1 joule output for every mile of fence. Okay? Now, some guys will tell you, oh, you can run as many wires as you want with you. No, you can't. Okay. Your weed loads and things of this nature can really affect that. And when you get out in the toolies, and the very guys that usually tell me that are up there close to their connection, testing all 3, let's say they're running 3 strands. Oh, see, they're all the same. Well, yeah, where you're testing it at. Okay, let's go to the very end and test. That's where it usually shows up. And so, yeah. The thing of it is check with the manufacturers, because a lot of manufacturers have now caught on to the fact that everybody's running them like this, okay? So they are changing their chargers, and chargers have advanced a lot over the years. But what you're going to want to do is check with the manufacturer, see what their recommendations are, okay? And most of them are still usually hitting it right at about 1 mile per joule. Okay, keep that in mind. Now, good old number 5. This one, like I said, is more common than you might know. Improper grounding of your electrical fence. Use this as a rule of thumb. 3 foot of ground rod per joule of Energizer output. So basically, if you're using a 6 joule Energizer, you're going to need 18 foot of ground rod in the ground. Okay, that's what they call for. This typically would be like 3 6-foot ground rods, spread at least 10 foot apart. I kind of go about it in a different way because, you know, in dry soils and so forth, you start losing grounding capability. They make, and most of these, I know like Tractor Supply carries them, Premier Fence carries it. They have these 3-foot galvanized grounding rods. They have got like a stake type head. It's pretty heavy duty, built right into the thing, which makes it real easy to take it back out of the ground if you want to move them around. So they've got that, plus they've got the wire connector on there. I'll usually go ahead and double up the amount of grounds instead of using, you know, 3 6-foots. I'll go ahead and use a half dozen of these 3-foot rods, hammer them in, spread them out in my pasture going down that fence line. Okay, understand what you're trying to do is you're trying to get a good ground between that electrified fence system and the dirt in your pasture. Okay? That's where their little feet are at, and that's what aids in that get off this fence shock. Okay? Pretty simple. So either way it goes, you want to have at least on like a 6 joule Energizer, or just use the 3-foot of ground rod per joule of Energizer, because some guys are going to have a 12, 15, whatever. Follow that rule of thumb, and you're not going to have any problems with your grounding. Grounding is one of the big problems you see with electrified fence. They're not grounded properly. Might have been in early spring when you put it in, and the ground was good and moist, but as the summer progressed and the drought came on, guess what? You're losing your power, right? Because you don't have a good ground. Don't get cheap on the ground. It's not an afterthought. It's a very integral part of that system. Okay? Number 4, not fencing for the wildlife in your area. Out here in Tennessee, we're primarily dealing with small deer. Okay? Some fairly large, but deer. So they will clear and can get through like 5-strand barbed wire. They wrestle a little bit with the cattle panel. Usually, unless they absolutely feel they've got to get into that pasture, they're going to pass on that. Especially if you run at least a strand of barbed wire at the top. Things of this nature. So most all standard fencing works well for that particular critter. Now, you get up north now where they got elk and moose. Okay. There you're facing a whole different set of circumstances. Moose doesn't jump well. Elk, better, but they're definitely not any high jumpers either. They will tear the heck out of a fence though trying. Okay, so if you're up in that kind of an area, you're probably better off going with either setting a lower fence that these animals can clear, or go high. I've had some of the guys up there say, no, we just go high, or we totally discourage them from doing it. Or you can use the breakaway post systems to kind of discourage them coming through the fence, because they hit a standard fence like we use down here, you're going to have quite a bit of damage before it's all over. So Please keep that in mind. So number 4, not fencing for the wildlife you're going to be dealing with out there. That brings us around to good old number 3. Number 3, not properly planning your project. That gets really common, really common. Some guys aren't bad at it. Other guys kind of look at, I want to get the most grass I can out of every square foot, and they're not really looking at the topography of their land and not looking at obstacles that they have to deal with. One of the big maintenance items on fences is falling limbs. You want to either keep the fence away from those trees or the trees away from that fence. Your choice. I mean, if you're needing firewood, it's a good way to go. Okay, cut them down. And get a good clear, you don't want any much overhanging. I always like running cedar tree lines inside my pastures because they are natural insecticide for flies and so forth. They're good cover in storms for the cattle, things of this nature. But it's inside the fence line, okay? My fence is on the outside of that. I don't want any large overhanging trees and tree limbs over my fences. A good thunderstorm come through, you're out there dealing with it. So when you're planning your project, keep that in mind. It's better to have a few less foot of grass, all right, and pick up the slack with your pasture mix, but you don't want, when you're looking at where you're placing that fence, look up. Those tree limbs are going to cost you time and going to cost you money because they will blow down, period, okay? Right storm come along, it's going to start dropping limbs, and it'll play havoc on your fence. So number 3, make sure you're properly planning. Look for things too, like your creek crossings. I don't recommend running a lot of fencing close to a creek bank if it is got any kind of a bank at all. Eventually it will have it. Because what ends up happening is it begins to wash out more and more of the soil. Suddenly your fence posts get in danger of falling into the creek. So if you're going to fence in a creek, go to the other side and go back a ways. All right? Leave yourself some room to work in that creek line. You never know when you want to change and put in like some rocking and so forth to slow the water flow down to where you're not losing dirt, and also puts in a little extra water supply for your livestock. So look at things like your creeks and so forth. One other thing that a lot of guys don't think about, I have a little story about that one. A friend of mine, he had a pretty steep hill, long grade, but it was steep. And he put his fence for his next pasture right at the bottom of that hill. Okay, I mean right there. And then later on, without thinking, he decides he's going to move his calves that he was weaning into that lower pasture to go ahead and wean them. Well, some of those mamas, about 3 of them, showed him that, listen, we can get a good running start and we'll clear that fence for you. And that is exactly what they were doing. They were jumping over that fence. Now he'd go the next day, he'd have to be out there, move back out of that pasture and start all over again. And what he was telling, he finally moved him into a different pasture. I talked to him about going with a no-ball technique for weaning his calves because you cut a lot of that down. But yeah, I told him you can either keep them out of that pasture and listen to the noise, or move that fence in far enough to where, number 1, they can't get a running start and jump your fence. Number 2, where they got a spot to kind of lay down and graze. And it's the no-ball technique for weaning cattle is, simply put, you just let the cows get in an area to where they can get up against those calves, smell them. The calf can smell mama. They can lay down at that fence line together where they feel like they're still connected. Most of the bawling and so forth comes from separation. Okay, that's not only are you depriving the calf of milk that it's gotten accustomed to feeding, and then you're depriving it part of its feed, but cows are very social animals, and you're depriving them of that connection with their mother. So if you just fence it off to where, you know, they can smell each other, they can see each other, they can lay down next to each other, you'll have a lot quieter place, honest you will. That brings us to number 2. Keep forgetting what side that thing's popping up on. Number 2, not properly spacing your posts. Now most guys think, well, you know, if they're too close, what's the problem? That's where you're losing it right there, guys. A lot of people over fence. Seriously. I mean, posts cost money. All right? It's that simple. Posts cost money. So you need to be using the proper amount of post, and you will find that you're going to save some money on your fencing. Of course, it's going to depend on the type of fencing you're planning on using, but most people use more posts than are actually required. Cattle panels, we'll start off with them. With wood posts, if you're going all wood post, you're going to be at every 8 foot with a wood post going down the line, and I wouldn't use anything smaller than a 6 or 7 inch wood post. You see some guys out there with these little 4 inches and you kind of smile and go, you like fencing, don't you? Because you're going to be doing all that. 6, 7 inch, put them in the ground good, you'll be fine. All right. I always make sure you waterproof and seal the bases that goes in the ground, guys. It'll keep those posts there a lot longer and on up out of the ground. All right. But anyway, you want to use a 6 or 7 inch post every 8 foot. So what I prefer to do is I like mixing wood post with T-bar. And that way I can put wood posts every 16 foot and then fill in with a couple of T-bar in between them. Okay. Some guys go a little further than that. I don't. Yeah, I want the ends of that cattle panel attached to that wood. Period. So then I hang my insulators on the wood posts, and as you're running your wire or whatever, pull it taut, wrap it on the wood post, keep going down. That way, if one of them gets broke, the other ones will continue to hold that wire up, and it's not going to be laying against those T-bar. Okay, so you're not grounding it out. Everybody needs to inspect their fencing every now and again. You don't want to happen to be out there inspecting your fencing when your animals are out running loose because you dead shorted your lines. All right? And that's another thing. Cattle panels, you're less likely to have even with it de-energized, you're not really, no cattle usually get out. Okay. It takes them a while to work on a weak panel or something of that nature to get out of a cattle panel fence. That's the thing. Okay. Bob bar. Rule of thumb. 1 post every 16 foot. Then I like to use, if I'm using like a 5 strand, I'll use 1 or 2 stays in between the 16 foot. Usually 1 at 8 foot will take care of it. And that's primarily because you'll have animals try to push between wire, and they'll push one side down and lift one side up, and out the fence they go. With the wire stays, you don't have that problem because it keeps that fence all moving at the same spacing. So that's a inexpensive fence. If a guy's tight on a budget, bob wire, 5 wire, 4 to 5 wire bob wire. I like 5 because I'm always thinking about that little calf who's going to scoot out that bob wire. You can put your posts, like I said, spread the son of a guns out, go every 16 foot, wire stay in between, you're good to go. Okay, you're not trying to fence in an elephant here. Okay? It's just cattle. Because if you're using the bob wire, I really get hesitant about running an electrical wire because, like I spoken there earlier, you end up with dead shorts. They knock an insulator off and boom, there you have it. And then you're out trying to hunt that down. Usually bob wire will contain, especially cattle. Goats, but cattle it'll contain. Okay, High tensile electric wire. That is, if you got the money, all right, this is the way to go. I'm serious. And there is a lot of ways to save money on the high tensile fences. High tensile fences, you can set those posts from 50. I've set them not as far as 100. I've always ran 50 to 80 foot. You can go, I've heard guys say run them at 80 and 100 foot, somewhere along in there. You can cover a lot of ground with high tensile fencing. You really can. The biggest thing is it's going to require that you have the stays that actually sit on the ground. Okay, you're going to need to space them down the line to keep that wire from being able to be pushed down or pushed up. That's it. A lot less wood posts. A lot less wood posts. To alleviate the stays, I'd reduce your fence posting down. You spread on your fence post to 20 to 30 foot, somewhere along in there, and you wouldn't require any stays because your adjusters can keep it tight on that short of a run. All right? Don't be stingy with the adjusters. You'll want to kick yourself later on. I always like to put a fence line bracing every few hundred foot on any fence, like especially high tensile. That way you can put your adjusters on that and pull that stuff together both directions. Okay. Or else you pull one line in this direction, and you'll adjust it, the other one pull in the other direction. That way it helps stabilize that fence. Make sure you don't over nail your insulators for your high tensile wire. Those wires should freely slide inside those insulators. Okay? You're using your adjusters at your corners primarily, or at your cross bracing, either way. That's what's going to hold your fence tight. Okay? Anything in between, you want sliding in between that insulator. If you nail that insulator down tight, let me tell you what's going to happen. As you're making adjustments to tighten that fence up to keep it tight, you're going to suddenly start pulling posts one way or the other. Don't do it. Make sure it's free. It's one thing you want to check. So keep that in mind. Large acres, you can, like I said, you can spread out to 80 to 100 foot. I've not ever went 100 foot with high tensile wire. Just haven't done it. It's just me. Okay, I've seen some guys who have done it. The fences have held up and they've lasted. All right, but I myself haven't. It's just one of those things. Okay, but still, it's a heck of a cost savings to do because it's a lot of wood you're putting in out there, folks. Same thing again. Make sure you coat your post good. Rot is the number one thing. The smaller the post, the faster it rots. Keep that in mind. A good, 7-8 inch post will stay in the ground a long, long time if properly treated. You can sure help me out with one thing. We're getting to the end of this thing. If you would, put in the comments what kind of fencing you do yourself. What do you prefer? I'm kind of trying to get a little feel of the majority. Like myself, I'm a cattle panel guy. I like they hold up, durable. You may be barbed wire. Another guy may be high tensile. I am a fan of the high tensile fence also. But let me know. I'm kind of curious. Just make a little one-liner, barbed wire. So that you know. Or if you have any questions about what we've talked about here a little bit, throw them down there. I'll be happy to get back with you on them. If you really liked it, then go ahead and like and hit that subscribe button, and maybe even share it on your other social media. All of it helps. Okay, so now we're going to get started on the rest of this. And now we're coming in at number one. Good old number one is probably the biggest fence killer of all of them, and definitely is the number one mistake made by most people doing fencing. Okay, ready for this? Corner posts and your brace posts for your corners are undersized or not deep enough. Well, I'm using the same size post as I'm using on the fence, right? Wrong. You want to upgrade on that. this turns into the biggest problem on barbed wire. You know, anything that has tension on that fence. Okay, those corner posts and so forth get a lot of abuse because that's really what everything hinges on. It's going to take on some of the load every time a cow or what, you know, deer or anything else gets against that fence. The corner posts and that cross bracing is what takes the abuse. They go pretty quick. One of the big things I have seen over time is people not putting them deep enough. All right. Now you run around, you put your other post in at maybe 3 foot. Great. Here again, these posts are the ones that take the abuse. Well, I plan to concrete it in, is what I hear a lot. It doesn't help. It helps a little, but it's not going to do the trick. Your corner posts and your corner bracing, here's a good rule of thumb. As much post as you want sticking up out of the ground, you want stuck in the ground. And concrete helps, okay? But here again, make sure you seal that post even with concrete, because concrete is porous, it will take moisture into it. The longer you can keep those posts from rotting or moving, the longer your fence is going to hold up. That simple. When they start going, you've got problems. So if you're running a fence that's 5 foot or 6 foot above ground, that's what you want underground. So those posts are expensive. Especially the corner post and the corner post bracing post. But that's what you're looking for. In sandy soils and so forth, man, that's just a lifesaver to you. You have a solid, because really your corner posts and your corner bracing, they're the foundation of your fence. And if you don't build a good foundation, man, you're done. I was helping a neighbor one year, and he was using, and it just blew me away, he was using cut up telephone pole. We about wore ourselves out on those things, but yet while he didn't go because I think he was leaving 6 or 7 foot sticking out of the ground because he's running high tensile. These things were stuck in the ground about 4.5, 5 foot. Those get heavy. Trust me. Okay. So, you know, as far as that goes on high tensile and so forth, I like to run at least an 8-inch. Okay. Bigger is better. This is one of the places where bigger is better. You can on some high tensile fences, and here's where if you need to cut costs on it, this would be the way to do it. High tensile fencing, as far as your straight runs, do not take a lot of abuse. Okay, they really don't. Now there's where you can go a smaller diameter fence post, secured well into the ground. I mean, you want it into the dirt good, but because really your fence is that high tensile wire, your posts are just there to give it a little support. So you'd be better off spending the money on the corner posts and the bracing, because that's where most of your pressure's coming in. And you can trim back the size of your, that's not a great recommendation, but yeah, because the smaller the post, the faster that post rots. Little tips: angle cut tops of your posts, and make sure you keep a sealant on those posts, or take a little piece of tin, nail over it, give it this little tin roof. Do not put your nails down through the top. It's kind of like, I don't know, whistling through the graveyard. It's not going to do you a lot of good. Okay, but you can cover that up with a little piece of tin, wrap it down on the sides, tack it in. Anything to keep that water from, and you definitely don't want to just sitting on top, because it will, and it will begin to soak into that post. Water is a killer of most fencing. Yeah, even T-bar rusts out, but it is a killer of most fences. So make sure you seal it up good, okay, and keep it sealed up. You notice I didn't go into what they call the country fences, you know, the 4x4 posts with the boards and so forth, which you see a lot on people that own horses and so forth. I'm not a big horseman myself. Okay, beautiful animals, love the animals, just Never got into them. Those things, if you want to do it right, paint them before you even start and let the things dry. Seal your posts good. You know, lay it out right. And I've seen these snakes going down the road, and it's like you almost get dizzy watching as you're driving by them. But you know, there's other fencing methods out there that contain a horse well. Um, but if you're going to go that kind of a route, I would start off with don't buy the standard Lowe's HQ whatever lumber. Find yourself a lumber mill that rough cuts the wood, okay? Because there you're going to get. You go to Lowe's and buy a 2x6, okay? You're getting a 1.5 by 6 or by 5.5. Go to a regular mill, you're getting a full 2x6, okay? So you're getting a little extra thickness and a little extra wood, which gives you a little extra strength, okay? Because you'll see those fences. You come back and look at those fences, you know, 6 years down the road, and most of them look like heck, okay? So, you know, and that's the reason I don't deal too much in the country fence thing. I don't see it as a good, long-lasting fence. They take too much abuse, and Lord, your horse is just going to be chewing on it half the time anyway. But, oh, what is it, those things in wood? I think they're beavers. I always have horse people tell me, oh, they got teeth. It's like, oh, yeah. So, you know, the country-style fence like that, what ends up happening is you get the fence all up, and then you can decide to go paint it. Well, down between the cracks of the wood where you put your wood together, where the wood is went up against your posts, all that still is not painted. And trust me, water will get in there and commence to rot and stuff. Your nails start pulling out, your boards begin to warp, all those kind of things. So the reason I say the country fence takes a lot of pre-planning is you want to take and lay that stuff out and paint it before you start it. Okay? Before you start, paint it. At least get one good coat of paint on it. Let it dry good, so forth, to where it's easy to handle and so on. And yeah, you're going to have some situations where you got to make cuts and go back and take care of that. But usually that's the biggest problem. You'll see them painting their fences all right, but it's after they've installed it. It's got bare wood back behind it, and it will begin to rot pretty quickly. Okay. So I'm not a big fan of country fences. They're pretty, okay, but I'm not a big fan of them. Anyway, this is Rich. I hope you found this useful. I hope you enjoyed it a little bit, and we'll be talking to you real soon. Y'all take care and have a great week.